Okay, I'm delighted to be joined on the line for a special off the ball interview with none other than Rosemary Smith, an Irish racing legend, a name very familiar to a lot of the racing enthusiasts in Ireland and across the world, possibly as well. Rosemary, thanks a lot for taking the time out to speak with me. First of all, I guess, talk to me about these strange times. A lot of us in lockdown, and I know over 70s were in a cocoon phase, I guess they called it. But how's this whole period been for yourself?
I didn't mind it at all, Shane. And lovely friends of mine, they still send me things saying, oh, once the cocooning is over, you will emerge as a beautiful butterfly. And I said, oh, that would be nice. But I don't think that's going to happen somehow. But I haven't minded it because since the book came out and since I did the Formula One drive, I tell you, and that's 3 years ago now, it was just time. I don't know where time has gone. I've been here, there, backwards, forwards, London, France, everywhere else. It's just been extraordinary. I mean, I never ever thought years ago that, when I'd given up driving, that there'd be anything more. You never think, when you're actually participating, then it's a question of you're just wondering where the next event will be, where's the next rally. And if you've done well in the previous one, that's great. If you haven't done so well, you say, oh, hump it, move on to the next one. So I never look backwards. Somebody said to me one time, never have regrets, because there's really nothing you can do about them. But I know they were wonderful years. I enjoyed every one of them. The driving end of it and the traveling around the world, that end of it. Personally, no, I didn't enjoy too much of it. But having said that, I mean, it's just anybody who gets the opportunity to get that I got. And, I'm the first to say that I got it because I was considered a competition manager for the Roots Group when I did the very first Monty I did, which was as a privateer. And he met me at that and he said, great, that's absolutely great. Wouldn't you be good for publicity? He didn't think would I be good for driving? No, that wasn't the point. I was good for publicity. So I said, fair enough, that's grand. But, I didn't accept the offer when it was sent to me first. And the only time ever my father really gave out to me was because of that. And because he's a very calm man, very quiet man. And he taught me to drive. He taught me everything I knew about driving. And then, of course, experience. You have to have two things when you want to go either be a racing driver, rally driver. You've got to have a certain amount of talent, and you also have to have somebody who's behind you and who will help you on. And, if you do well, praise you. And if you don't do well, they don't praise you, that sort of thing. But I was lucky that in the beginning, I got offered a drive as a co-driver, which, of course, to this day I can't do, or navigator as they were in those days. It was really difficult, all these map references and, this and that and the other and turn this way. And it's totally beyond me. So anyway, then I do a bit of driving and she would take over driving to the finish and she'd drive out to the start. I didn't mind it at all because I just loved it. And, as you go through life, and then, I did a few hill climbs and then, of course, Mondello opened. And that was the greatest joy. I think anybody who wanted to be a racing driver, they couldn't wait for it. Because up to that, you only had road races. Like you had Dunboyne, you had the Curragh, you had Limerick, or not Limerick, where was it? Wicklow. And it was just, to have our own little race circuit. And of course, I was so happy I was asked to turn the first sod down there. And I photographs of sitting on the bonnet of the car and the local priest down there. And he sort of blessed it. And please goodness, there's going to be no fatal accidents. I think at the whole time, there were only about one or two in all the years it's been open now, which is an incredible record. And then you had people like Ayrton Senna, the great Ayrton Senna, who, God help him, he's dead now, but he raced there. He won the Leinster Trophy in sometime late 80s. But it's a great starting ground for anybody who wants to do anything. Any youngster, they can go down there and they can get the little cars. They've, first of all, the little saloon cars, and then, of course, they have the single-seaters, and, you can go on from there. But it's just fantastic. I think it was one of the greatest things we got here in Ireland at that time.
I should mention as well, there's a documentary, Golden Mondello. This documentary around the history of Mondello Park, and as you mentioned, people like Ayrton Senna, Mika Hakkinen, James Hunt, Tommy
Yeah.
Byrne, they all, spent some time there. It's, I guess, Italy has Monza, France has Monaco, and
Oh,
Ireland
oh,
has
yeah, they
Mondello. So,
all.
how important was it in your own, I guess, cultivation as a top racing driver? Is it? I assume it's hallowed turf for up and coming rally drivers in Ireland.
Well, yeah, in a way. But and you had Eddie Jordan on the other day. But Eddie was one who used to race down there all the time. My very ex-husband, he used to sponsor Eddie at times. I always laugh at that, but he did. And he did some rallies as well, Eddie did. And no, it was just something, and there's so much camaraderie there, and if you broke down, there'd always be somebody who would have the bit you needed, or so. They were very, very, very friendly. But like all other parts of motorsport, it's got much more serious, and it doesn't matter whether it's the youngsters or whether it's the old people. Well, the older people, I better be careful here. And they have, the lovely historic and classic cars, and they take that very seriously also. When that started, the classes started, it was sort of one of these things that, anybody could afford to get a little car and then go out there and race around Mondello. But they take it so seriously now, and any of these little cars, they're not inexpensive any longer. They are very expensive. But anyway, but for the younger people coming up now, there's a very good girl, and she's Nicole Droush. She was written up in the paper the other day. And she is now, I'm not saying very lucky, but in this, she's very lucky because she's got a 3-year contract to race for man in America. Now, there was no such thing when we were doing it, unfortunately. And the one time I was running for a racing, there was a place going in Vauxhall, and I wanted that place just for racing. Now, it wasn't rallying, it was just racing. And so I said, no, definitely, we've got to go over to the Grand Prix at Silverstone. And the day before the Grand Prix, they always have the saloon car race. And there were 34 cars on the grid. And because I was only a rally driver, I had to be a reserve. So during the practice for the race, the rain came down. See, Silverstone's very odd in this, that it could be beautiful sunshine one end of it, and then the other end of it, spilling rain. So, of course, everybody had gone out on the slick tires. And, of course, when they got down to where it was wet, they were going flying off into the bank all over the place. But I was lucky enough that I kept it on the track, and I ended up 4th overall on the grid, as I thought. I know, but you see, it didn't matter. I got a place on the grid, okay, but because I was only a rally driver, I was put down to the end of the grid again. And anyway, the race started and everything was grand, and I was shooting up through everybody in front of me. And, I was so thrilled. It was the greatest thrill of my life. And I came into the left-hander. It's now a chicane they have there, but just a left-hander. And I went to change gear, and the gear lever came out in my hand. And the lads I brought from Dublin to look after the car for the weekend, make sure it was running and so on, they apparently had forgotten to put the split pin in the gear, where the gear lever went into the, whatever it goes into gearbox, I suppose. And I was left just floating down the place, couldn't go anywhere else. I was never so annoyed in my life. And I was up to 3rd overall at that stage. And I knew I would have got the drive with Vauxhall. And of course, they gave it to somebody else then after that. Because, but these are the things that, if you're going to go rallying or racing, you just have to take the good and the bad. Because sometimes, even people that aren't that good, because they have a really good car, they could be way up front. But it's not, you just have to take it as it is.
You mentioned Thrill of Your Life there, and I have a copy of your book here. Some people may have read it. Driven is the name of your book. So some incredible stories in there. You mentioned earlier this idea of sexism, possibly in the sport back in your day, but from reading the book, Lord Stokes was someone who was the head of British Leyland at the time, and I know you had referenced the London to Mexico rally in
Yeah,
1970,
yeah, yeah.
and he had said something along the lines of, girls, I don't care how you do. Essentially, just if you get as far as Dover, I'll be very happy. Was there that sense of that you were there for the publicity shots, for, as you said, sitting on the bonnet, for the lovely looking photographs, or was that a common thing at the time?
Not so much, no, because that was in early 70s. No, it was very much so in the 60s. But no, I think, you see, the car we hadn't really been tested at all. It was a Maxi, and it was a 1475cc engine. And there really wasn't very much testing on it. So in one way, it was like, well, girls, if you get as far as Dover, and having got all the photographs in Wembley and people fussing around, and that was great at the time. But the way he said it, I thought he was disputing my ability to get it to Mexico, and that's what annoyed me. And I said, "Over my dead body," but we're going to get there. But it was a really, really, really tough run. And I mean, it was 17,000 miles. And it was over territory I'd never been over before. I'd been all around Europe, because we did 5,000 miles around Europe. And then we finished in Portugal, and then we flew over to Rio, and the cars came on a boat, So we had 8 or 9 days in Rio. And I mean, things like the Christ on the cross, outside Rio and so on. And we saw all those things that you'd heard so much about Copacabana Beach. And, it was, and of course, staying in luxury hotels and meeting, we were to go and meet the British ambassador to Mexico, who was in this, in Rio. And we all piled, all the British Leyland people, we all piled into cars and arrived up at this particular party. And we were ushered in, and, "Oh, you are so welcome," and so on and so on. And then I said to one of the manager people with British Leyland, I said, "None of them are speaking English. This is very peculiar." We'd gone to the wrong house, and it was the wrong party. It was a Russian party. And they were all drinking vodka by the bottle. So I said, "I think we better get out of here rather rapidly." So the doorman, I don't know what they must have thought, but, we all turned tail and fled out and down to the other party. But silly things like that happened. And, it was just a different way of life. And then, unfortunately, when we left Rio, we sort of started off practically into the dark. And then we got to Sao Paulo. And I mean, these are places, luckily, at school, one of the only things I really enjoyed was geography. And, and then before this trip took place, I used to take out the atlas, and I'd say, well, we're going there, over to Rio, and the whole way down south, and then up don't ask me, San Salvador, and up the Panama Canal and everywhere else. But, you don't realize just how vast the place is until you get there. And then we started off, and then when we got to Sao Paulo, it was it was pitch dark, but there were hundreds and thousands of people out on the road to see the cars going through. And about 2 cars ahead of me, a man had run across, the rally car had run over him, and, everybody was, and of course we all had to stop. And the police came out, "Go on, go on, go on, go on. If you stop, you're going to get, really practically, they'd come out and they'd kill us practically." But apparently the man was dead. But that was that. And then we went into the Andes, and all over the Andes. One special stage was 1,600 miles long. 1,600. So you can imagine. But no, we were quite lucky, because we had gone 3 up. There was a lovely girl from Scotland, Alice, and another girl she was from Annemasse, just on the border between Switzerland and France. And she was really lovely. But then when we stopped at the top of the Andes, Alice got bitten by all these cactus flies. So we just piled her into the car, and she looked, she's the worst case of measles that you ever saw in your life. But she was unconscious for 2 days. And then, we were, the next stop was Peru, which was hundreds of miles away. And, I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" "Oh, we're going to go on." So what can we do? We're up on the top of the Andes. Nobody's going to come and find us, basically. But anyway, so we continued, and then we got to the border to go down into Peru itself. And on every second day, no downward traffic, only upward traffic. And we got there just after midnight. And the little man said, no, you cannot go down. And I said, but we must go. She's dying. He didn't really care. So I said to the other girl with me, she was just a lovely girl. And I said to her, just now watch this. We're going to go backwards. So the little police or whoever they were, the border control people, so they got out of our way nicely. And then I put it into first gear and away I went. And I crashed through the barrier. It was only a wooden pole, so it didn't do any harm because my car had these bull bars across the front of it. And we started down this mountain, and it was a mountain, and it was about so wide, and there was a cliff at one side. Part of it, there was a cliff at the other side, but then when we got down further, there was sort of a drop the other side. And from 12, just after 12 midnight till 3 a.m., we went down that mountain with all the trucks starting to come up towards us. Now, somebody must have got in touch with them and said, look, this mad woman, she's going down there. Just, keep in as much as you can. So all the big trucks coming up, and they were fantastic. They all had these frilly lights across the front and coloured lights and just everything. They're all dressed up in crosses, holy crosses hanging on them. And some of them had these frilly, sort of like sun blinds on the front of them and so on. But they heard anyway, and they were very good. They kept right over. And my other girl, now Alice was still in the back of the car, absolutely out cold. She didn't know what was going on. So anyway, then we started down and the horn was blaring. We had one of these big air horns, absolutely blaring. And it took us 3 hours to get down the mountain and into Park Ferme. And there was an ambulance waiting for us there. And I don't know how, again, there were little planes flying back and forth, so they must have realised something was, I don't know even how the ambulance got there. But anyway, so that was fine. So they took Alice out of the car and they put her in the ambulance and away she went. And I turned around and this girl that I knew very well, she and her boyfriend were at Trinity at that stage. And I got out of the car and the two of them were standing there. And I thought, no, this is awful. I'm hallucinations. So I nearly collapsed because I really thought I'd never had hallucinations before. But anyway, and they said, no, Rosie, it's us. It really is us. We're here because her father was something big in one of the embassies. So that was that. So we went off to bed anyway. And so that was grand. And so we were there. That was 3 a.m. And I think we were there for the next day. And then we were going off the next night or something. And I said, well, that's the end of our little rally, end of story. And then the next thing was that there was a little knock on the door. And here were two, they were obviously porters from the hospital, and they were holding Alice under the arms. And Alice had nothing on but a little hospital gown. And she was tiny anyway. I mean, she was only about 7 stone at the best of times. But she had swollen up to about 12 stone at one stage. And she looked dreadful. We thought she was dead, but we still said, well, we're going to carry on and see how we get there. I sort of always, I went out to win. That was the thing. I hated giving up. But anyway, here she was back again, and she could just about talk. So we got her into some clothes, and then we got her down to the car, and we strapped her into the back of the car where she lay sort of half compos mentis. We fed her Lucozade and bits of sugar, glucose sugar. But anyway, we finished up all right, and we finished and we went the whole way, which was a long, long way. And then the night before the actual finish, we went, and it was a lovely place. It was a sugar plantation, which was run by an Englishman. And he knew we were coming, so he'd invited us all to stay, all the English drivers, so on, to stay. And I always remember, went in and we got dressed up, even though we were exhausted, but we got dressed up for the dinner. And there was a beautiful swimming pool out of the back with gardenia heads all in the swimming pool. And one of the other drivers, whom I did not get on very well with, a male, I hastily say, but as he's still alive, I better not tell you his name. But he just elbowed me and into the pool I went. And it was the last thing I needed. I really thought, I might as well stay here. I am so tired. I hadn't the energy to get myself out again. Anyway, I was pulled out. But the next day anyway, having had beautiful, beautiful dry weather the whole way through, well, in that part of South America. But the next day it was spilling rain. And we were to drive into the Aztec Stadium because it was the year of the World Cup. And we're going into the Aztec Stadium, and there were bands and there were gendarmerie and the rest of it. But everybody scattered. There was nobody. There was nobody on the roads. There was nobody in the stadium. There was nobody anywhere because the weather was so bad. I mean, the rain was coming down and bouncing back up at this height. And but anyway, we finished and we won. We won our class and we won the ladies and we won the team prize, I think. So we did well, but it was an experience. But then after that, and we flew home, and then the plane had a puncture when it was taking off from Mexico City. So we had to land in Canada, and then they wouldn't let us out because we had no visas for Canada. So we just had to, we went out, we said, we've got to go to the loo. And this woman, she said, no, you can't leave. You haven't got anything, you just can't leave. So, well, we leave our shoes here. And then, okay, she said, that's okay if you leave your shoes here. And then we nipped off down the corridor, went to the loo, came out, and I said, there's a lovely restaurant there. Now, we'd had nothing to eat for hours. We were sitting in this departure hall or whatever it was. So we nipped in, and two lovely men got up and said, oh, won't you join us? And then they wondered about our shoes, so we had to explain why we had no shoes. And then anyway, we had a lovely meal and a few glasses of wine, and then we potted back up. The same woman was on, she was still in, on, what do you say? She was still on duty, I suppose. And she looked us up and down. She said, oh, did you have diarrhea by any chance?
A long time in the toilet. You mentioned, Rosemary, geography there as something, and I mean, famously you won the Tulip Rally in the Netherlands in 1965, a fantastic achievement. Another interesting anecdote from the book was during, I think it was the London to Sydney rally, possibly the Khyber Pass, 33 miles between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and you had to at one stage reverse the car for quite a significant length of time. So can you tell people that story for those who may not have known the story?
But it was just, I mean, again, we had gone so far, and we had because the pistols were gone. And, again, because I knew if we could get up, because I was going into Pakistan, then we'd be down into India. And I knew then from there we would be sailing across down to Perth or Fremantle. And I said, we've got to get there. Come hell or high water, we have got to get there. So my father had always told me, because as I say, he was an engineer, mechanical engineer, and he said, if car won't go forward, it'll go in reverse. So we got up about, I'd say, if we got up half a mile, but it was very steep. It was like that. And it was like Mall's Gap here down in Kerry, actually. It's very similar to that. But anyway, and I said, well, we can't go forward. It just wouldn't. It just stopped. So I thought, okay. So we freewheeled back down to the start. And the border people and so on, they were sort of, what are you doing? And I said, I can't go that way. I've got to go. So they thought we'd given up and we were going to go that way. But I put into reverse. So we reversed the entire way. I think it was 53k or something like that. I'm not sure. It was a long way. I still have a crick in my neck all these years later. Oh, but we got there anyway. And but it was hard going. And then once we got sort of over the top, and if you look at the map, once you get into Pakistan, then it's sort of downhill into India. I'm sure it's not, but to me, in my mind, it was. So down we went, and at this stage, Lucette Pointe and myself were not talking. We never talked. She didn't like me. I didn't like her. She wanted to manger, or she was fatiguée, or whatever the hell she was. Anyway, a very wrong person. I didn't choose her. I did not choose her. The manager chose her. But anyway, so we got down, and then we got into Lahore, and it was really, really frightening. They'd never seen anything like the cavalcade of people. And certainly, like, I had long, very blonde hair at that stage, and it was, they'd never seen a white person, basically. And in Lahore, we were practically, I was going to say raped. No, I don't mean that. Beaten up, you know what I mean? And they were pulling and shoving and everything else. And then we left there and we got down very late. Then we were going through, somewhere where we were going through anyway, and the car broke down completely. And then all the natives came out on their camels onto this desolate road, and they were all around us, you know, and they wanted something. They were pulling at my hair, and they wanted the jewelry and all this sort of carry on. I mean, it was really exciting. But looking back on it now, people say, would you ever do it again? And I'm such an idiot. I'd probably say yes, I would. Why not?
I mean, one word we haven't really focused on so far is danger. And I know if you went to your insurance broker and told them that you were a rally driver, I'm sure your insurance premium would be quite high. And you speak in the book about different instances. You know, in the Alpine Rally, I think you talked about seeing an amputated hand of a co-driver of a different car on the ground, and to a lesser extent, a Monaghan Rally, not far from where I'm sitting here in Newbliss, you had bits of a car stolen, a lot of the car stolen. So was fear ever anything that came into it for you? Were you afraid behind the wheel at any point?
No, I wasn't really. And I mean, as far as insurance was concerned, we didn't think things like that in those days. You know, it just didn't enter the question. And, you know, I went off all around the world, as you know, but we never had insurance. And that was it. But no, there was only once that I really, because I was really, really annoyed and very worried on the Geneva Rally, and we got a drive with Porsche and the manager, Husker von Hanstein, and he gave me a Porsche, and I thought, brilliant. Now this is, you know, it's got power, it's got speed, it handled like a little dinky toy. It was just wonderful. And the head man, if you like, who was leading the whole rally, Paul Toivonen, and and on the last night, we were lying second to him overall. And we were coming up, and the girl, I had Jeanette Derole on, the same girl as came on the London, Mexico. She's a lovely girl, she's done a few rallies with me. And anyway, she never showed any fear at all. But when we were going up, and I could see the headlights of Paulo Toivonen up ahead, and I said to her, great, we're catching him. This would have been brilliant. And we came down, and she said, oh, Rosemary, slow down a little bit, please slow down. And I said, you know, slow down, no way. Again, 3 o'clock in the morning, always in the dark, always. And we came in, and she was saying, slow right, very slow right. And came down, put my foot on the brake. Yeah, where's the brake? There was no brake. The shock absorber, it was rear engine, the shock absorber had broken, and it had fallen and had cut the brake pipes. And when we were going in, and it was a sharp right-hander, and she said, you know, and which so unlike her. So anyway, the only thing I think, slam it down through the gears, right down into first gear. And then the last one, it was left-hand drive car. So I yanked the handbrake, and it spun around, and the nose went into the cliff on the right-hand side. And it sort of then bounced back a bit and then went forward a bit. And all I was worried about was Jeanette, and all I could do was hear her being sick. And I said, oh, are you hurt? Are you all right? So I got out of my side of the left-hand side of the car, came around, and it was so narrow, the road, that I could barely get between the tail of the car and the edge of the cliff, which went straight down into a ravine. So we were there for we were there for minutes now before the next car. So the next people could not have caught us if we had kept going. So they had to bounce the back of the car out and find a little place that's slightly wider and push it in there and then continue. So I said afterwards, you know, Jeanette, why were you so worried about this? And she said, oh, Rosemary, last year, 2 of her very best friends, they had gone in exactly the same place, but they had gone off, and it was 250 meters. I'm sorry, this is the telephone.
No problem. No problem.
Shut it off. I can't talk to you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
But anyway, yes, they'd gone off, and they'd crashed down into the ravine, and the 2 of them were killed. So that's why she was so sort of, you know, upset and aggravated and one thing and another. So I didn't say aggravated, did I? agitated. I get the word right. Yeah, I get the word right. So that was the end. It was the end of the rally and the end of our drive with Porsche, which I was really, really upset by.
One of the cars you speak very fondly of in your book is the Hillman Imp. And I know at the time this was a competitor to the Mini and engine in the back and so forth. And I think you wrote in the book that, you know, it was a car that was quite fragile, but needed a gentle hand. And you obviously provided that for it. So what does that car, what does the Hillman Imp mean to you in terms of your career? And how important was that car for you?
Well, I still have one. You know, I have one that was an actual works car. But what does it mean to me? Nothing. It was always too slow. And I kept saying, now downhill, I could pass anybody because, you know, especially in the Alps, and it'd be going. And it really was, it was very nimble and it was, you know, good road holding. But then, you know, when you get going up the other side, of course, what happens? Every car that you've passed downhill goes, they all up by you, rate of knots. Yeah, it was a great little car, and it led on to a lot of other things, bigger and better, I suppose. But I seem to be known best for the Hillman Imp because, I mean, the Tulip Rally, as you were saying earlier on, we won that outright. But again, because, you know, we had the weight in the back and there was a lot of snow. Now, the Tulip Rally is normally when the tulips are out and, you know, the springtime and sunshine and so on. But this particular year, there was snow and ice the entire way around. And it was just, it was ridiculous now. It was ridiculous because we had all our light summer clothes with us and so on. But anyway, when we got stuck on one particular climb, I said, now what are we going to do? And Val Domleo was with me. And I said, Val, get out and sit on the boot lid and hold on it. There were two little handles because the engine was in the rear. So there were two little handles to open the bonnet at the back. So she sat on it and bounced up and down for I don't know how many miles. And we got to the top anyway, whereas a lot of the other cars couldn't make it up the col at all. So we were very lucky in that. We really were. But when we got back to the hotel in Noordwijk, it was in Holland, and we'd gone to bed because, you know, well, I was exhausted. And, you know, we didn't think we'd won anything, to be very honest with you. So then we started getting, the telephone would ring, and then you know, the door would be knocked on the door and one thing and another. And you've won, get up, come on, you've won. Would you go away? And then Val, who was always, she was such a nice lady, a lovely girl, you know what I mean? And a brilliant navigator. And she said, Rosie, I think maybe we should get up. I sort of have a feeling that maybe we've won something. So we thought the winning something was the ladies probably, you know, because we couldn't think of anything else. And when we went downstairs, they were all the foreigners and everything, very big entry. And they were all there standing around clapping and wonderful and marvellous. And we had won it outright. But the unfortunate part was that the lovely trophy, which the trophies were beautiful, solid silver, big bunches of tulips. And then you got, you know, we got the ladies as well, and I think the class, whatever. But anyway, and then we were all given just the little things of tulips. But again, solid silver, which I had in the house in Ireland. And of course, I had burglary after burglary after burglary. So a lot of those really good trophies, they just don't exist any longer, unfortunately. But, you know, so many things. And then, you know, it's really awful. People would just take trophies, because a lot of the trophies now are watered glass or Cavan crystal or Dublin crystal or some of these beautiful pieces of glass. But people would take them, and then the guards would find them later on smashed up in a ditch somewhere or something like that. Why do people do that sort of thing? Is it just out of badness or out of jealousy? Or I just could never understand it. But anyway.
Beggar's belief. You mentioned, Rosemary, at the start of the interview, 3 years ago, I think it is now, your Renault Formula One drive. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly at the time, I think you're one of, if not the oldest person to get behind the wheel of a Formula One car, which is extraordinary power in itself. For people who don't maybe know that story, and there's a famous video on YouTube, and as you said, you became a viral sensation almost off the back of that YouTube video because so many thousands of people watched it. But how did that opportunity to drive a Renault Formula One car come about, and what was the experience like for you?
Well, it came about because Renault here in Ireland, they asked me to come a brand ambassador for them, which I am, and I still am. And then we were at some dinner. It was one of the Car of the Year dinners out in Parscourt, out beyond Dublin. And I was sitting at the Renault table with a lovely little man. He was French, and he was he was James Boyer. Oh, Boyer. So I was sitting beside him, and after a few glasses of red wine, and what do you do? And he knew I was an ambassador for them, but he wasn't quite sure. I could have been a rugby player, or you know what I mean, but he had no idea. And I was telling him what I did, and he said, Monte Carlo Rally, ooh, and this rally, and Le Mans, and so on and so on and so on. He was very impressed indeed. So that was that. So I had just got a new Renault, and I said to he and the man who was with him, I said, I have a little red light on in the car. I said, I don't know what it is. Can you tell me what it is? And so they both came out. But when I stood up, and I'm very tall, and I'm still very tall, this little man, he was up to about here. He was the sweetest little thing you've ever seen in your life. But anyway, he, I think, was based in London at that stage. But now, about 6 weeks after that, Paddy McGee, he's the head of Renault here in Ireland, who's an absolute sweetheart. I don't know whether you've ever come across him or not, but he's a lovely, big man, great sense of humour, and a lovely person to be with. So he rang me up and he said, would you like to drive a Formula One car? Ah, yeah, sure, why not? It didn't cross my mind to what, why, when, where. It just didn't. Yeah, sure. So that was that. So then I thought, no, I didn't tell anybody, because they would have just laughed at me. They would have said, because I was 79 at that stage. And so I said, fine. And then letters started to arrive from the PR people in London, and people who did the overalls, and people so on and so on and so on. And then I thought, I think they're serious about this. And then I got a call to say that it was on a certain date. I think it was the end of May that year. And but I could bring somebody with me if I wanted to. So I got my friend June, and I said, do you want to go to France for 3 days? And she said, yeah, great, thinking we were going wine tasting or something. I said, no, we're going to Paul Ricard, which was the name of the circuit, which had been reopened. They used to always have the French Grand Prix there. But anyway, it's now redone. It's beautiful, beautiful place. So anyway, sure, that'd be grand. So we flew out. The plane was one of these red-eye planes out to Marseille. And then we arrived out there. And then, just there were people and the great big enormous trucks and the trailers and so on and so on and so on. So first of all, I had to go and be fitted for the suit. And they were filming all of this the whole time. And here I'm trying to get into the undies to go with the overalls and that, and then to the neck brace, and then the gloves and the boots and the helmet. It's listen. But it was all great fun. And then I started to get nervous. And I really got nervous. And June kept saying, listen, don't worry about it. You're well able to do it. Formula One car. I've never sat in a Formula One car. But anyway, so that was all right. And then Alain Prost, who used to race years ago, and I knew him from old, and he turned up by my side. And of course, because the older, Formula One drivers, they were all quite small. But anyway, he turned up, and he was all chat away and don't worry about it. And then there were people, and there were ambulances, and there were drones and helicopters, of course, and you name it, everything. And so this all went. Then I had to go out and fit in. It was a little Renault Clio, and one of the instructors out there, they came around with me to say, now it goes, Benz, go this way and that way and that way. So after about 3 laps, and he was driving, I wasn't driving, so then I drove. And I said to him, please don't say anything now, because when I've done a recce for something, I remember the roads very well, and it's only a track, it's only round and round and round and round in circles. So I said, no, please don't. I want to do it myself. If I make a mistake, so be it. So then the next day, I went out in a Formula Renault, which was a smaller horsepower. I think it was just 400 brake horsepower or something. But I didn't find that so difficult, actually. But a man went out that one of the directors of the whole of the racetrack, because he was French, and he said, if I don't think she's capable of doing it, we will not let her go out. So I thought, well, yeah. And then the other thing he said was, do not pass me out. Do not pass me out. I thought, pass him out. If I could even keep up with them, I'd be lucky. But anyway, that all went very well, and I came in then. And then he said, yes, she's perfectly capable of doing it. And then I had to sign all these indemnity forms just in case, you know, I went and killed myself or killed somebody else. And I laughed. And it was the only time that day I really laughed, because here's the form saying between the ages of 17 and 60. And I'm looking at this girl, she spoke good English. And I said, I'm well over that age, you know that. I said, oh yeah, but don't mind that, don't mind that, just sign your name here. So I'm sure if they did have an insurance company backing it, they wouldn't have been very pleased. Anyway, that was all right. Then I got into the Formula One car, and I mean, that was just, now I'm slim, but it was even slimmer, and you have to get down and go down and down and down and down. And I said, if I go any further down, my toes will be sticking out the front of the car. So, I mean, it was really as bad as that. And equally, you just can't see. And this guy, Tom, he said, can you see my finger? And I said, yes. He said, now, can you see it? Yes, yes, yes. And he said, now, that's on the top of the tire. Can you still see it? And I said, just about. Oh, he said, that's all right. Then you're in the right place. He said, but I can hardly see anything out of this. But anyway, he assured me, no, that was the way that it was meant to be. So then two pedals, because it was the paddles behind the steering wheel, again, which I'd never used before in my life. So I had no clue whether this was up or this was down or this was, you know, I mean, talk about living in the long lost years. But anyway, so that was that. Got into the car on the given day to go out to do it. And I said, you know, well, where are all these other people? What are they doing? Oh, they're just here for you. There must have been, don't ask me how many. They were everywhere. As I say, there were ambulances and drones and this and helicopters. And I said, for me? Oh, yes, yes, this is just for you. So anyway, that was that. And then one of the things I said to the PR man, I said, you know, they really went to a lot of trouble for me just for a few laps around here. Everything had RS. My overalls had RS. The whole car had RS. The tires had RS. I mean, this is just incredible. And he was an Englishman, lovely man actually, but he looked at me pityingly and he said, RS is for Renault Sport. Did you ever feel stupid?
Close enough.
Yeah, I did that day. But anyway, so that was that. And then again, just when I was going out, one of the mechanics, he said to me, and I had one of these neck braces on, which is very difficult to wear. How the boys wear them. God, I have the greatest admiration for the drivers today. But anyway, they had this on me. And just when I was going out, this mechanic, and he said, you see the red button down there? And I said, and, you know, I couldn't see anything because I couldn't bend my head. And I put my hand out. He said, don't touch it. He said, just if you crash and burst into flames, just pull the button. That was very, very encouraging, just as they were pushing me out of the pit. And then the other man came over and said, you know, Jeremy Clarkson, he stalled it and stalled it and stalled it and stalled it. They were fed up because they had to take the battery out or you know, the thing to keep it going anyway. And Jeremy and I did not get on very well when I worked with him. And I just sort of thought, well, if he stalled it, I am damned if I'm going to stall it. So I went really slowly. Luckily, it was a bit downhill going out of the pit area. And this guy, nice guy, Tom, he kept saying, more throttle, more throttle, more throttle. So as he said it, I'd go a bit more and more and more, just coming off the clutch, that bit. No, not the clutch. What did I got? Oh, don't ask me. I got totally confused. I think I had a brake and an accelerator or something. But anyway, so once I started off, once I got out of there, it wasn't that I was frightened about it. I was frightened of making an absolute idiot of myself. I mean, who would give a woman of 79 years of age a Formula One car to drive? So that was that. We went round and round and round a few times, and you know, it was it wasn't a full circle, it was sort of an in-between circle, a bit like, you know, in Mondello, they have all the different, you can have the big circle and the little circle and the original circle. Well, this is Paul Ricard, because they have a school down there all the time as well. So anyway, so round, and then the flag came out, and then I pulled in and so on, and the mechanics came out and they pushed me back into the pit. So sigh of relief, and then unbeknownst to me, they brought out my co-driver, who still comes with me, and Pauline was there. She burst into tears. I burst into tears. She had the bottle of red wine, though, which was a salve to my awful. Well, it was just one of these things. I'd done it. And I was so pleased to have done it. I mean, even though it wouldn't have been fast, I know very well it wouldn't have been fast, but it was just an interesting thing to have done. And of course, Renault were delighted but the only thing, like the reversing over the Khyber Pass, the Guinness Book of Records, because the girl who came with me over the Khyber Pass, she wouldn't ratify it for me. So they wouldn't put it in because they didn't believe me, because she wouldn't, she was a French girl. And the same thing happened, that it was because they said, no, she'll never do it. They didn't send anybody out from the Guinness Book of Records, which I was very sad at the time, because I thought it would have been great. So I don't think anybody at my age has done it since. I'd like to do it again now, though. I really would, because, you know, having done it and now knowing more about the car and one thing and another, but, you know, not to be, I don't think.
I can only imagine the thrill of it. I mean, can I just... and you've been very good with your time. At the very start of your book, quite interestingly, we've spoken about the danger and fear and you know, dicing with death, I guess, in your profession over the years. Towards the start of your book, you talk about planning your own funeral and visiting the funeral parlour in Bray, I think it was, with your friend Pat Doyle. I mean, that must have been quite a strange and surreal experience. It's not something that a lot of people get to experience. So how did that come about? And I guess it comes from you wanting to plan your own funeral and your legacy, I guess.
Not really. It's just, you see, I don't have any family. You know, my sister and brother are both dead. My mother and father, of course, are both dead. And I don't have children. I don't have a husband, luckily. No, I enjoy life very much, but because I didn't want to have one of my cousins, say, having to deal with a lot of nonsense when I did die. So I thought, now what we'll do, I will go to a solicitor, get him to do all up the papers and one thing and another. And then I said, we'll go, because I want either a white, a pink or a lilac wickerwork coffin. I don't want one of these awful, you know, these brown things with brass handles. I think they're really horrible and vulgar, and, you know, I don't want that. So I got that all written down. So I said to Pat, and Pat, that came with me, by the way, she's the one that the book is dedicated to, but she died after the book was printed. So I couldn't put RIP, which I was so sorry about, because she was a friend of mine since I was 14. And she died of motor neuron disease just before the book actually came out. But anyway, so we went out to this place in Bray, and it was very quiet and really nice, you know, hushed. You couldn't talk in anything but this hushed voice. And this lovely, lovely gentleman came out, and he said, and ladies, how can I help you? So I said, do you have wickerwork caskets? Oh, well, we can have them. And he was one of these people, a dark suit, and the hands like this, you know, the way they sort of nearly go like this. And I thought, oh, and he was all sleeked and the hair sleeked back. And I said, yeah, well, I want one. Now I said, what colour did it come in? Well, wickerwork is fawny brown. No, I don't want that. See, Adam Faith, who I went out with, as I told you in the book years ago, when he died, he had, the first one I saw was a wickerwork casket, and he had one. And I just thought, what a great idea. I like it, and it's not so, you know, yuck. So he said, well, they come in sort of beigey colour. I said, no, I don't want that. What were you thinking of? Well, I'd say pink or... So he said, and how soon do you want it, my dear? And I said, I don't know yet. And he said, well, who's it for? I said, it's for me. And then he really must have thought he was being, you know, it was a trick. No, I said, I just want to know how long it would take. I said, I've no intention of dying yet, you know, but just in case. So that was, that's 4 or 5 years ago. So I hope he sees this and he'll realise. I'll go back to him though if he can get me the pink or lilac, and I want lovely in the little, and I want to be burnt up, I want to be cremated, because I wouldn't like to be buried alive. And they say mobiles don't work if you're 6 feet under. So I just think that, I want, like they would for a wedding, little thing of, like archways as you go into the little church at the crematorium, and I want pink and blue and lilac and baby breath and all. I want like that, a nice pink and white ribbons and that sort of thing. And then as I'm going up the church, and then you go up and, you go along on a thing, and then you go through a curtain, and that's the last anybody sees of you in the coffin. And what I wanted was just, it's time to say goodbye, the song. And I said, and then I want a big hand coming up off the coffin like this to this, and then it's time to say goodbye, that beautiful song. And that's what I want. And I think that's very easy. But I did say, if anybody cries or laughs, one or the other in the church, they're not going to the afters, because I left money in some bar or, somewhere that they all go and have something nice to eat and lots to drink.
Absolutely. It's incredible. Can I just finish off, Rosemary, by asking you about, you mentioned Nicole Drought earlier, and I know there was Formula Female events recently where, they're trying to get young girls involved in rallying and interested in karting and that sort of thing. And Nicole Drought is obviously a young driver in their mid-20s from Roscrea and Tipperary, doing incredible things on the world stage. But what would you say to any young, I guess, female drivers in particular in Ireland who are thinking about getting involved in rallying, but maybe don't have the nerve to go through with it, or perhaps second guessing themselves? What would your advice be?
Well, obviously, first of all, they must like to drive. Now, of course, some of them are so young they haven't driven at all, so they can go down, but they can go down to Mondello. But for somebody who has a driving license, make sure you like to drive, because the thing with racing or rallying, you must keep your lines. That's the one thing. Now, especially in racing, you can go into a bend and you can go in, say you're on the left-hand side, and then you chop across like to the right, and this sort of thing. But you must have the nerve that if there's somebody coming very close to you and they're inside you, or whatever the case may be, don't give way to them. Don't be a little lady and say, after you, sir. Just keep going. But so many youngsters, they do go down to Mondello. That's what I said in the very beginning. It's an ideal place for them to see whether they like it. Some people wouldn't like it at all after they've had a few rounds, and especially when they have an instructor who's saying, that's very good, now keep more to the right, keep more, go on, put your foot down. And the instinct to a lot of youngsters would be to put the brake down, not the accelerator. So, no, it's great that they have somewhere. But the other thing is that, as I said earlier on, they must have money. They must have money. And they're not going to get a sponsor until they've proven something. And they can't prove something if they don't have the money to get a decent car that, has a possibility of winning if they're good enough. They need talent. And then they need nerve. And they need money.
Absolutely. Well, listen, for anyone, I guess, who wants to know more about the history of Mondello Park, Golden Mondello, From Grass to Glory is the name of that documentary. You can check out Mondello Park's. Exactly.
It was Michael Carroll, wasn't it?
That was exactly it, yes. So people can check out Mondello Park's social channels if they want to find out more about where they can see that documentary. But listen, Rosemary Smith, you've been very good with your time. And for people that want to read the book, it's called Driven. Some incredible stories. There's you in your Formula One.
My RS.
Exactly, your RS suit. Yeah. So some incredible stories, and they're really great tales. But Rosemary Smith, thanks a lot for chatting to Off the Ball this afternoon.